Hello, welcome to this presentation. Hi, I'm S.O PienS. I'm the president of medical students of Osun State University, Oshogbo campus, Osun State, Nigeria. I want to give a presentation, endocrine physiology, endocrinology. So before we proceed, let's have the outline of the presentation. Number 1, we start with introduction. Number 2, we look at types of endocrine organs. Number 3, we look at types of endocrine disorders. Number 4, we look at classification of hormones and their properties. Number 5, we look at mechanism of hormone actions. Number 6, we look at hormonal secretions and the functions. Number 7, we look at endocrine functions of the kidneys, the heart, the pineal gland, and the thymus. Then number 8, we look at the pathophysiologies. Alright, so I implore you to listen very well, and this presentation will help you in 2 ways. Number 1 is it will give you quick revision on things that you've understood on endocrinology. Number 2, it will also help you to have an overview of what endocrinology it's all about. So I implore you to sit back as we start. Now, starting with the first one, we're talking about endocrinology. Endocrinology is an important aspect of physiology that deals with the study of functionality of endocrine glands, okay, vis-a-vis their secretions that we call hormones, okay. It also involves the study of disorders of these glands, right? So let's look at cellular communications and definition of a hormone. We have a number of cellular communications. We have autocrine communication, okay, that is communication within the same cell. That's auto means self, okay. We have paracrine communication, we have justacrine communication, we have neurocrine communication, that's mediated by neurotransmitters. We have endocrine communication, that's mediated by hormones. We have neuroendocrine communication, okay, via the neurosecretion of neurohormones, you know, that is from hypothalamus and adrenal medulla, okay. We have some other chemical substances like cytokines, which are molecules that are secreted by some cells that act in an autocrine, paracrine, or endocrine fashion to exert their effect on the target cell, okay. We also have the autocoids. Autocoids, they are vasoactive substances that act locally, okay. We have a number of them, okay, that are locally acting hormone. We have prostaglandins, we have thromboxane A2, we have leukotrienes, and and so on and so forth. Examples of cytokines, depends on the kind of cell anyway. When it comes to immune cell, you call them lymphokines. An example is interleukins. When it comes to adipocytes, you call them adipokines. An example is leptin, okay. When it comes to chemical action, you call them chemokines, okay. So an example is the complement proteins. Alright, so let's have a definition of a hormone. A hormone is a chemical substance that's secreted by a ductless, endocrine gland into the blood and is being carried to its specific target organ to exert its physiologic effect. That's what hormone is. Now let's talk about types of endocrine glands or organs. We have the primary endocrine organs, we have the secondary endocrine organs, then we have the diffuse endocrine organs. The primary endocrine organs, they are called primary because their only function is endocrine function. We have a number of them. We have the thyroid gland, we have the pituitary gland, we have the adrenal gland, we have the pineal gland. They don't have any other business. What they do is hormonal secretions, okay. The secondary endocrine organs, their secondary function is endocrine function, so it's not their primary action, okay. An example is hypothalamus, the gonads, the ovary and testes, the pancreas, the kidneys. So they are also involved in some other business. So endocrine function is not their main function, okay. Then the third category is the diffuse endocrine organs. That's in the GIT, okay. Different parts of the GIT, especially the enterocytes of the small intestine, the gastric glandular cells, they release different hormones or chemical substance, So now let's talk about types of endocrine disorders. types of endocrine disorders. We have primary endocrine disorder, secondary endocrine disorder, and tertiary endocrine disorder. Now, what do you call this primary endocrine disorder? The disorder that is from the terminal endocrine organ, which can be adrenal cortex, the thyroid gland, the gonads, that's the testes or ovary. Okay, that's the primary endocrine disorder. You think result from the the terminal endocrine. When we start looking at the axis now, you understand what we're talking about. The secondary endocrine disorder is the disorder from the anterior pituitary gland, that is second in the axis. Then the third endocrine disorder is the disorder from the hypothalamus. Okay, disorder from the hypothalamus that result in tertiary endocrine disorder. All right, so let's look at classes of hormones. Hormones can be classified on the biochemical nature as protein and polypeptides, steroids, and amino acid derivatives. Okay, e.g. from tyrosine. Hormones can also be classified based on the mechanism of hormone action or the location of hormone receptor as number 1, class 1 hormones and class 2 hormones. The class 1 hormones are those that have their receptor inside the cell. They have intracellular receptors, okay, which are the steroid and the thyroid hormones now in this case. Then we also have class 2 hormones that they have their receptor on the cell membrane. Examples are the peptide or protein hormones and the catecholamines. Okay, they have their receptors majorly on the cell membrane. Alright, so let's look at the properties of the hormone biochemical nature. So we start with steroids. The steroids, their hormones are from gonads, ovary, and testes. Okay, adrenal cortex, and from kidney. That's vitamin D from kidney. Okay, now most of them originate from cholesterol. Cholesterol having steroid nucleus. That's cyclopentanol per hydrophenanthrene ring. Okay, that's their common origin, common precursor. They also have intracellular receptors. They are non-polar. They circulate in the blood, bound to plasma proteins because they are non-polar. Okay, so they are not stored in the endocrine glands. So they are only synthesized when they are needed. So they are not stored. Okay, so they can be administered orally because they cannot be digested by the digestive enzymes because they are not soluble in water. So that makes them to be orally administered. They have relatively long half-life. Okay, that is talking about the properties of steroid hormones. Talking about thyroid hormones now. Thyroid hormones are derived from tyrosine, that's tyrosine and amino acid. Okay, can cross the cell membrane. Okay, that's lipid soluble, transported in the blood, bound to plasma proteins very well. Have intracellular receptors, that's in the nucleus. Is stored in the follicle. Thyroid hormones are stored in the follicle. Okay, in colloid form. They can be administered orally. They're relatively non-polar. The thyroid hormones, that's T3 and T4, and they relatively have long half-life. Okay, let's talk about the protein or peptide hormones. The hormones that are from hypothalamus, pituitary gland, parathyroid gland, and the endocrine pancreas. Okay, sometimes some hormones from placenta sometimes can be protein or peptide hormones. Okay, synthesized as pre-hormone or pre-pro hormones, stored in membrane-bound organelles. Those are properties of peptide hormones. They are stored in membrane-bound granules. They are relatively polar. They often circulate in the blood in unbound states. Okay, they cannot be administered orally because of the destruction by the intestinal digestive enzymes. Yes, the receptors are located on the cell membrane. Most of them, they have their receptors on the cell membrane. Okay, they relatively have short half-life. Let's finally talk about the properties of catecholamines. They are derived too from tyrosine, just like the thyroid hormones too. They do not cross the cell membrane readily. They have surface receptors located on the cell membrane. They are transported in the blood free or loosely bound with plasma proteins. They are stored in membrane-bound granules. Examples are norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine. Those are catecholamines, and they relatively have short half-life. Now let's talk about the mechanism of hormone action. The first step of a hormone action is to bind to a specific receptor at the target cell. Okay, let's talk about location of hormone receptors now. On the cell membrane, for peptide or protein hormone and catecholamines, there are receptors which can be ion channel linked receptors, okay, common for ligands such as neurotransmitters and hormones. G protein linked receptors, common for protein or peptide hormones. Then enzyme linked receptors, common for leptin receptor linked with tyrosine kinase enzyme. Just giving examples, okay. So ion channel linked receptors usually for neurotransmitters, okay. G protein linked receptors for for peptide hormones. Then enzyme linked receptors for leptin receptors, okay. That's an example. So usually the first messenger is the hormone. Then we have the second messenger systems. We have cyclic AMP, we have cyclic GMP, we have a number of them. Calcium carmodulin complex, we have phospholipids, we have inosine, triphosphate, all those different complexes that's second messenger systems, okay. So they are involved in cellular signaling, signaling communications, okay. Now that is the location of hormone receptors on the cell membrane. Now in the cytoplasm, that is for steroid hormones. Then the nucleus is for thyroid hormones. The number and the sensitivity of hormone receptors are downregulated or upregulated via a number of actions adopted by the target cell. Okay, so I repeat that again. The number and sensitivity of hormone receptors are downregulated, okay, or upregulated via a number of actions adopted by the target cell. Okay, so the first messenger is the extracellular communication. Second messenger is intracellular communication, okay, via the cyclic AMP, cyclic GMP, calcium ion carmodulin complex, phosphatidylainositol, second messenger system, and etc. Now, so let's start talking about those hormones now. The hormones, secretions, and their functions. Now we'll start with the hypothalamic hormones. Hypothalamic hormones are secreted into the medial eminence and tuber cinereum. That's the hypothalamic extension into the pituitary stalk, and reach the anterior pituitary gland via the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system of blood vessels. Okay, remember we have three major portal systems. The one in the hypothalamus, the one in the kidney, and the one in the liver and the intestine. Okay, now the hormones are the hypothalamic hormones are the thyrotropin releasing hormone, which causes the release of TSH, that is thyroid stimulating hormone. The corticotropin releasing hormone, which causes the release of adenocorticotropin, that is ACTH. The growth hormone releasing hormone, which causes the release of growth hormone. The gonadotropin releasing hormone, which causes the release of two gonadotropic hormones, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Growth hormone inhibitory hormone, also known as somatostatin, it causes the inhibition of growth hormone release. Prolactin inhibitory hormone, or dopamine, it causes the inhibition of prolactin secretion. Okay, so but there's recent discovery that thyrotropin releasing hormone causes the release of prolactin alongside with thyroid stimulating hormone. So we can say that prolactin has got its own prolactin releasing hormone too. That is thyrotropin releasing hormone in disguise. Okay, so now let's talk about the pituitary glands now, the pituitary hormones. Pituitary gland or hypophysis cerebrae. The anterior pituitary glands, or also known as adenohypophysis cerebrae, originate from Rathke pouch and possesses 5 types of cells that release 6 different hormones. The cells are the somatotropes, release growth hormone. Corticotropes secrete ACTH, that's adenocorticotropic hormone. Thyrotropes secrete thyroid stimulating hormone. Gonadotropes secrete luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. Lactotropes or mammotropes secrete prolactin. Okay, let's quickly look at the function of these hormones. ACTH stimulates the production of glucocorticoids and androgens by the adrenal cortex and maintains the size of zones of the zones of the adrenal cortex that produce them. The TSH, that is thyroid stimulating hormones, stimulate the production of thyroid hormones by the thyroid follicular cells, okay, and maintains the size of follicular cells, okay. Follicle stimulating hormone stimulate the development of ovarian follicles, regulates spermatogenesis in the testes of male, okay. Luteinizing hormone causes the ovulation and formation of corpus luteum in the ovary. It stimulates the production of estrogen and progesterone by the ovary, and it stimulates testosterone production by the testes in males, okay. Prolactin stimulate milk secretion and production. All right, now let's talk about the growth hormone. Growth hormone, its action goal is general growth of almost all body cells and tissues. Now the steps towards its goals. Number one is on metabolism. Protein metabolism, it increases protein synthesis by increasing amino acid transport across the cell membrane, increasing gene transcription of DNA and RNA, increasing RNA translation to protein, decreasing protein catabolism, okay. That is the effect on protein metabolism. On lipids, now it enhances fat utilization for energy by mobilizing fat from the adipose tissue. It increases fatty acid concentration in the blood. It increases ketogenesis. It has ketogenic effect. Very important. Please note that growth hormone has ketogenic effect. Effect on carbohydrate, now it decreases the peripheral utilization of glucose for energy production. It increases glycogen deposition in the cells. It decreases the uptake of glucose by the cells, okay. It increases blood glucose level, that is, it has diabetogenic effect, okay. Now the effect on bones and cartilages, it stimulates bones and cartilage growth by increasing the number of bone and cartilage cells, okay. Then the mode of action of growth hormone. Growth hormone exerts much of its actions by stimulating somatomedin C, also known as insulin-like growth factor 1, okay, because you also have insulin-like growth factor 2. So insulin-like growth factor 1 is somatomedin C, that's secreted from the liver, that prolong the effects of growth hormone, okay. That is on that. Then the regulation of growth hormone secretion, we have conditional regulation and hormonal regulation. Conditional regulation as per the condition. Growth hormone is increased during hypoglycemia, during fasting, during stressful conditions, during initial stages of sleep, during exercise, excitement. It increases in certain amino acids when there's increase in certain amino acids in the blood, okay, like all these basic amino acids, okay. Then it also increases when there's release of pyrogen. Pyrogen is agent that stimulates increase in body temperature, okay, or fever. Protein deficiency. Now growth hormone also increases when there is protein deficiency, okay. So conditions that causes decrease in growth hormone secretion are hyperglycemia, increase in free fatty acids in the blood, rapid eye movement, sleep, okay, aging, and obesity, okay. That is for conditional regulation. Hormonal regulation, now growth hormone releasing hormone increases hormone growth hormone secretion. Ghrelin increases growth hormone secretion. Glucagon increases secretion. Estrogen increases that. Androgens also increases growth hormone secretion. Cortisol decreases growth hormone secretion. Growth hormone inhibitory hormone, that is somatostatin, decreases its secretion. Exogenous growth hormone itself decreases its secretion because of negative feedback mechanism. Then somatomedins also decrease growth hormone secretion. Now let's go to posterior pituitary glands or neurohypophysis cerebri. It's developed from a neural tissue, is a neural tissue outgrowth or extension from hypothalamus. The hormones are the ADH and oxytocin, that's antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin. Both are nonapeptide, that is, they have 9 amino acids in their structure and are produced by a group of large neurons called magnocellular neurons, which are located in the supraoptic, majorly for ADH, and paraventricular nuclei for oxytocin of the hypothalamus. ADH actions now. It increases facultative water reabsorption in the distal convoluted tubule and cortical collecting ducts. When ADH reaches certain level in the blood, it exerts vasopressive effects, therefore increasing blood pressure. Alright? Regulation of its secretion. Osmotic regulation. Its increase in blood osmolarity increases ADH secretion. Decrease in ECF volume increases ADH secretion. Okay, so please note that. Oxytocin now. Oxytocin actions in females. It aids milk ejection by the breast. It causes contraction of the pregnant uterus. It facilitates sperm movement during intercourse in non-pregnant uterus. In males, oxytocin increases during ejaculation. It facilitates movements of sperms into the urethra by causing contraction of male reproductive tracts, especially the vas deferens. Okay, now let's go to the thyroid hormones. The thyroid gland now is a two lobes joined by isthmus. Okay, the follicle is a functional unit of thyroid gland. All right, so now before we proceed, let's have this short break. I'll be right back. Alright, so you're welcome back. So now let's continue on the thyroid hormones. Now the thyroid hormones are produced by the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland, two lobes joined by isthmus. The follicle is the functional unit of thyroid gland. The follicle is formed by follicular cells surrounding a cavity that is filled with colloid, okay, which contain a protein called thyroglobulins, containing 70 tyrosine amino acids, which are secreted by the follicular cells. Okay, now these cells, they secrete the thyroid hormones T3 and T4. Some C-shaped cells are located beside the follicular cells, and therefore they are called parafollicular cells. They secrete calcitonin. Okay, let's quickly look at the stages of thyroid hormone secretion. The synthesis now. The secretion of thyroglobulin into the colloid cavity by the follicular cells, trapping of iodide into the follicular cells from the blood via iodide pump, called that iodide trapping. Oxidation of iodide to iodine by peroxidase. Iodination of thyroxine residues in the thyroglobulin molecules by iodinase, a process called organification or iodination. Coupling of iodinated tyrosine molecules. Thyroid hormones are stored in crude form as iodinated thyroglobulin until the gland is stimulated to secrete the hormones. Now, the physiological function of thyroid hormones. The action goal: to increase the basal metabolic rate or the functional activity throughout the body. Now, the steps towards the goal. Number one is on metabolism. It increases protein synthesis by increasing DNA transcription to RNA, increasing RNA translation to protein, increasing activity of mitochondria, increasing activity of cellular enzymes. Now, the effects on carbohydrate metabolism: it stimulates carbohydrate metabolism by increasing glucose uptake by cells, by increasing glycolysis, gluconeogenesis, and glycogenolysis. Okay. Effect on fat metabolism: it increases fat breakdown, that's lipolysis, mobilization of fatty acids, decreased cholesterol in the blood, phospholipids and triglycerol level also in the blood. Okay, it decreases their levels. Then the effect on vitamins and minerals: it increases need for these micronutrients, and so one tends to be to have deficiency if there is no appropriate balanced diet, if there is no appropriate intake of these vitamins and minerals. Okay, the effect on body systems. On cardiovascular system: it increases blood flow, cardiac outputs, it increases the heart rate, it increases force of contraction, cardiac contraction, it increases systolic blood pressure and pulse pressure. Then it increases the respiratory rate, that's on respiration. It increases the gastrointestinal motility. Okay. Then the function of thyroid hormones now. Continue. There's increase in muscular contraction. There's increase in body temperature. It exerts excitatory effects on the CNS. It decreases the body weight. It promotes body growth and development of the brain during late fetal life and early years of postnatal life. So children who tend to have deficiency of thyroid hormones in the early stage of their life, they tend to come up with what we call cretinism. Okay. Then thyroid hormone is also necessary for normal sexual function. Okay. Let's look at the regulation of secretion. Hormonal regulation. Thyrotropin releasing hormone increases. Thyroid stimulating hormone increases. Alpha melanocytes stimulating hormone increases. Leptin to also increases. Other factors are low basal metabolic rate also increase thyroid hormone secretion. Factors that decrease it: somatostatin decreases, glucocorticoids decreases, dopamine decreases. All this via hypothalamus. Okay. Then excess iodine intake and stress also decrease thyroid hormones secretion. Feedback control. Thyroid hormones regulate their secretion by inhibiting the release of thyrotropin releasing hormone and thyroid stimulating hormone from hypothalamus and anterior pituitary gland respectively via the negative feedback mechanism. Okay, so now let's look at adrenal cortex. Adrenal cortex has three zones: the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, zona reticularis. Zona glomerulosa secretes mineralocorticoids, zona fasciculata secretes glucocorticoids, zona reticularis secretes sex hormones or androgens. Okay, starting with the mineralocorticoids, they are usually aldosterone and 11-deoxycorticosterone. Functions: aldosterone increases sodium facultative reabsorption in the renal distal tubule. It increases ECF volume. It increases blood pressure. It increases potassium ion excretion and hydrogen ion excretion too. Regulation of secretion. Increase in potassium ion concentration in the extracellular fluid increase its secretion. Renin-angiotensin II system increase its secretion. Then decrease in ECF volume also increase its secretion. Likewise, ACTH, that's adrenocorticotropic hormone, also increase its secretion. Glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids are cortisol, corticosterone, and cortisone. Functions: on metabolism, it increases blood glucose level by facilitating gluconeogenesis and inhibits glucose uptake by the extrahepatic cells. It increases protein catabolism except proteins in the liver. It increases fatty acids mobilization and fat redistribution in the body. Okay, which tends to cause this Cushing of symptoms that we see in people with Cushing syndrome. Okay, like a buffalo shaped body structure. Then it also regulates the body water. Then it stimulates bone resorption by activating osteoclasts. Okay, it has anti-inflammatory effects and stress resistance effects. Okay, it has anti-allergic actions. It also has immunosuppressive effects. Okay, these are very important effects, and that's why cortisol sometimes is used as an immunosuppressant. Okay, now let's look at the regulation of secretion. Its increase in ACTH secretion increase cortisol secretion. Corticotropin releasing hormone from hypothalamus increase its secretion. Cortisol inhibits ACTH and corticotropin releasing hormone by negative feedback mechanism or effects. Okay, now let's talk about the adrenal sex hormones. We have the dihydroepiandrosterone, that's DR, androstenedione, and testosterone. Okay, now abrupt adrenal sex hormone secretion, that is adrenarche, that is responsible for growth of pubic hair. as puberty, at the onset of puberty. Okay, so the adrenal sex hormones are immediately for secondary sexual characteristics that we see in adults. Now let's talk about the endocrine pancreas. Endocrine pancreas is marked by the collection of some packet of cells that we call islet of Langerhans, okay, which has a number of cells. Alpha cells secrete glucagon, beta cells secrete insulin and amylin, delta cells secrete somatostatin, and F or PP cells secrete pancreatic polypeptides. Now let's start with insulin. Insulin action goal, anabolic functions. Now let's look at the effect of metabolism on carbohydrate. Now it decreases blood glucose level by increasing glucose uptake by almost all the cells for energy generation and storage as glycogen in the liver and muscle. It inhibits formation of glucose, that is through gluconeogenesis, or breakdown of glycogen, that is through glycogenolysis in the cells. Now the effect on protein metabolism. It facilitates synthesis and storage of proteins by facilitating amino acid transport into the cells and gene expression for protein synthesis. Okay. Now effect on fats metabolism. Now it increases fat storage, prevents lipolysis, and it also prevents the mobilization of fatty acids in the blood. So it has anti-ketogenic effects or anti-lipolytic effects. Now it's work in synergy with growth hormone to promote growth, yes, via those proteogenic effects and some other effects that we induce protein synthesis. Okay. Now regulation of secretion. We have metabolic regulation, hormonal regulation, and nervous regulation. Metabolic regulation now is increase blood glucose level, increases insulin secretion. Certain amino acids such as arginine and lysine increase insulin secretion. Then keto acids also increase insulin secretion. Those are metabolic regulations. Hormonal regulation now. Glucagon increases secretion. Growth hormone increases secretion. Cortisol does increase its secretion. Gastrin increases its secretion. Secretin increases its secretion. Cholestyrekinin does the same thing. GIP, that is gastric inhibitory peptide, increases secretion. Somatostatin decreases its secretion. Amylin decreases its secretion. Okay. Now the nervous regulation now. The parasympathetic increase insulin secretion while sympathetic decrease it. Please note that. Of course, we know that parasympathetic always cause anabolic effects like resting states, and while sympathetic will always cause fight and flight phenomenon. So it has to have antagonistic effects on the insulin. Okay, so now let's look at the function of glucagon. It increases blood glucose level. It increases peripheral utilization of lipids. It facilitates the conversion of amino acids to glucose via gluconeogenesis. Then let's look at the function of somatostatin. It majorly have inhibitory functions. It inhibits secretion of glucagon and insulin. It decreases stomach and intestinal motility. It decreases the secretion of GI hormones. It decreases the secretion of growth hormone and thyroid stimulating hormone from anterior pituitary glands. Okay. Now functions of pancreatic polypeptide. It majorly increases the secretion of glucagon by the alpha cells. Okay. Now let's look at the endocrine functions of other organs. That's the seventh item. Endocrine function of other organs. Now we start with the kidney. The kidneys secretes erythropoietin, thrombopoietin, renin, 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol or calcitriol, prostaglandins, kinins, and some other certain octacoids. Octacoids, like we said earlier, are locally acting, hormones or chemical substance. Okay. The heart secretes atrial natriuretic peptide, brain natriuretic peptide, and C-type natriuretic peptide. So ABC natriuretic peptides. Okay, that's by the heart. The pineal gland secretes melatonin, while the thymus secretes thymosin and thymine, which is also known as thymopoietin. Okay. Now, finally, let's look at the pathophysiologies of endocrinology. Now, we make it in two columns or two sections: hypersecretion and hyposecretion. For pituitary glands, hypersecretions are gigantism as in children, acromegaly in adults. Gigantism is excessive growth hormone in children. Acromegaly is excessive growth hormone in adults. So gigantism is before the closure of epiphyseal plates. Acromegaly is after the closure of epiphyseal plates, in which there is no longer growth of the bones. Okay, that is under hypersecretion. And also Cushing disease, that is excessive secretion of ACTH, that's adrenocorticotropic hormone. Cushing disease. Hyposecretions, dwarfism and acromicria. Acromicria is the opposite of acromegaly. Micra is micro, something small. Okay, so there's small fingers, small limbs, small nose, everything small, so that's for hyposecretion. Then for thyroid gland, we have hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. Now goiter is associated with the two conditions, hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism. Okay, for parathyroid gland, we have hyperparathyroidism and hypoparathyroidism. Okay, for endocrine pancreas, we have hyperinsulinism and we have hyperinsulinism, that is excessive insulin secretion. Then for hyposecretion, we have diabetes mellitus. Okay, that's a very common one, non-communicable disease that's is getting rampant in some of the developed countries. Okay, then for adrenal cortex, now we have, for hypersecretions, we have Cushing syndrome, hyperaldosteronism, and adrenogenital syndrome. Okay, then for hyposecretion, we have Addison disease, that's when there's deficiency or reduced secretion of aldosterone and some other adrenocortical hormones. Okay, so that's actually round off the whole section. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. You will succeed. Stay blessed and God bless you.